have John here, who was on Skype, and obviously one of my heroes from the early software days. We've also got Mike Clark here, who was one of my other hero companies, Psygnosis, one of the best game companies I think that came out of the UK. And it's just really, and we've got Michael Batlana, and I guess he's not here either. And Michael was the reasons I got involved with, eventually the reason I got involved with Aon, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So back in 1979, you know, I got my first home computer. It was actually a business computer because I wanted to teach myself programming because I'd been promoted to a job I couldn't do. Typical, isn't it? You get a job you can't do. So I thought, these guys are pulling the wool over my head. I can't do it. You know, so I got a Commodore PET. I taught myself BASIC. I taught myself peeks and pokes. I taught myself a machine code language. And you know, computing in those days, there weren't home computers. You tell kids today and they don't believe you. But there weren't home computers. There weren't smartphones. There weren't tablets. There weren't PCs even, right? So, and David's in the room now, so I'm no longer the oldest person in the room. I feel good. Yeah. So, as I said, you weren't in, Dave, but I was just saying I really felt proud to be in the room with one of my early heroes, David Pleasance. And Michael, if he's back in now. Yes, Michael's back in now. And we'll tell Michael's story later. So I got involved in Commodore PETs. And you know, it was fantastic. You were the forefront of home computer technology. And then one day I was walking past a computer store in Aberdeen, Scotland. That's where I lived at the time. And I saw a Commodore 64 playing international soccer. And I thought, this is marvelous. I mean, it's got moving people. There's sound, there's color, there's two teams. There's matchstick men. It's great. So I said, I've got to have that. But at the time, I couldn't afford to have that and the Commodore PET, so I traded in my Commodore PET and got a Commodore 64. Then I got a Commodore 128, then I got a Commodore 128D, and then I was living in America, you know, living in Texas, and in a thunderstorm, lightning hit my house and destroyed the Commodore 128D, the whole system. But luckily I had...
The D was destroyed.
Yeah, well, no, it was an act of God. Because my insurance policy said acts of God were covered. So with the money, I bought an Amiga 2000. So my first Amiga was a big box Amiga, an Amiga 2000. And I was totally blown away by just everything about it. It was just such a fantastic machine. So then there's Amiga 3000. There was an Amiga 4000. And I used Amigas in my business. So I always used Amigas for desktop publishing, for graphics work, for video work, for all the publicity work, the company I was with at the time, for all the technical manuals. And I used that all the way through the 90s, up till about the end of the 90s. Things happen, you know, Commodore go bust in 94, ESCOM go bust, Gateway don't want the Amiga, Amiga Inc. happens in the millennium. We can go through all the trials and tribulations of the post-Commodore era. But what was really exciting was I met Michael Batlana. Well, it was exciting, wasn't it? I was living in London at the time, and Michael has a technique of coming to places and finding local Amigans wherever they are, and local Commodore people. And he came to London, and fortunately I managed to get into one of his meetings.
Early as usual. You were like 15 minutes early.
Well, story of my life. Yeah. And so, Michael had arranged a dinner with some local Amiga guys, and I don't know if anyone remembers Total Amiga magazine. It was a really good magazine. The editor, Robert Williams, and his partner were invited to join Michael for dinner. Fortunately, his partner couldn't join, so I'd been, by this time, I was in London. I move around a lot, you'll notice this. I was in London, and in my basement I started to put a little museum together with all the computers I bought, apart from my first PET, because I had to sell that, but the other ones I kept. And I put a little museum together, and I was starting to collect computers from eBay. So I managed to get friendly with Robert Williams, and we used to have Amiga days, Commodore days, and we'd go down to my basement and we'd build things. We build Amathon systems. We repair stuff. We try and get stuff working. It was like in the Amiga world. And so I knew him. He said, look, my partner Mickey can't come. Would you like to come and meet Michael? I said, oh, that'd be fine. So I got to meet Michael. It's a long story. This is going round and round in circles. Got to meet Michael, and we became friends, and we became business partners to a certain extent. And I was on a trip to with Michael to see Commodore Gaming in the Netherlands. I wasn't going to see Commodore Gaming. Michael was. So I just tagged along for the ride, and we were going to see Commodore Gaming. And if you remember them, they did these fantastic cases. They were PCs, but they were called Commodore Gaming, and they had beautifully airbrushed cases. I think they're out of business now. And we took a trip through, I think we went through Belgium for some reason. And we met up with the Hyperion guys, who Michael knew. That's Everett Carton and Ben Hermans. And they just found out that day they were being sued by Amiga Inc. So they weren't very happy. We bought them a drink. And I made the mistake of saying, if you ever need any help, give me a call. At the same time, I started writing articles for Amiga Future, for Total Amiga, sorry. And I got quite a collection of Amigas by this stage. And I said, wouldn't it be good if someone wrote an articles about the Amiga, the history of the Amiga models? And Robert said, yeah, that's a great idea. Why didn't you do it? So I started doing it. So I started writing the articles. I did 3, and then Total Amiga got transferred to Amiga Future, the German magazine, which wasn't going to have an English language version, just German, although all of the subscriptions transferred to Amiga Future. But within a few months, Andreas at Amiga Future says, hey, it seems your Amiga retrospective articles are quite popular. Would you like to continue in Amiga Future? And I said, yeah, that'd be okay. It ran for another 17 issues. And by the time the last issue was published, with Amiga retrospective, it talked about the Amiga 1X1000. Who would have believed through that period that I'd not only be writing the articles, I'd be actually involved in funding a new Amiga computer. If you told me back in when I first met Michael in 2007, I wouldn't have believed you. But in 2011, end of 2011, 12, we had a new, and there's one sitting there in that white case, which runs very nicely, and I'm sure Alan will give you a demonstration if you want to see it. So by that stage, we started a new company, and Aeon Technology was formed. We had new computers. I still write for Amiga Future magazine. If you ever see them, it's called Classic Reflections, and it looks at all the companies, or the main companies, and individuals who contribute to the Amiga's success. And it covers all sorts. And in the current issue, it's just been released, you'll see part 1 of an interview with David Pleasance and Colin Proudfoot, who were the joint MDs of Commodore UK, and the concluding part will be in the next issue of Amiga Future. So that's how it's strange how these things happen. Yesterday yesterday, I can't believe it. I came from New Zealand last Sunday, went to Cardiff, had 2 days in Cardiff with the Amiga kit, went to London, had a night out with some Amigans. I do what Michael does now. I go and see Amigans wherever I go. I see bone balls wherever I go as well, but that's another thing. It's probably this. And then I went to Brussels. I met up with Hyperion, and I came back to London last night. In Brussels, I saw the Tabor board running the first ever release of Amiga OS 4.1 on the Tabor, was for the Amiga 1 1222. It's looking pretty good. I was pleasantly surprised and very pleased. So I'm here now today, and I'm ready to answer any questions you've got. You might not get sensible answers, but I'll do my best.
When you go to Poland?
Right. I always go places when people invite me.
Okay.
So you invite me to Poland. You invite me to Poland. I've actually flown through Poland. I did a flying trip through Europe, and we landed in Gdansk. A few years ago. It's good.
Cool. I have a question about the new machine.
Yeah.
who is the end user? And I know the answer. You said people who try to be different or like to be different. Is it true?
It's
Still?
actually what it is. It's quite surprising because the end users are usually people who've got who actually work in IT. You know, they might be running server farms. They might be, you know, maintaining equipment. It's usually people who are actually in the business already, and they come back and use their Amigas for relaxation, which is quite strange. You'd think they'd have enough computers working on it all week. So it is really, thank you very much. So it is really, most of them are people who are in the business. The demographics are very different. In the States, generally, the users are much older. They're more like me. But in Europe, especially Poland, Germany, for example, the UK, the users are much younger. The States, again, the users tended to have big box machines, whereas in Europe, they tend to be games machines, you know, the Amiga 500s and the 1200s. So obviously the X1000 and the X5000 are aimed at the top end, but the new machine, the A1222, is trying to aim back at the less expensive end to get it into hands of more users and grow the user base.
And what kind of release date would it be for the A1222?
Well, I would have said 2 years ago, as I said, because the motherboard's been ready for that long. But our hardware partners, Ultravaris, are now they're building the production model. So the production model's got one or two minor changes, more to do with parts rather than anything else. And it's all now up to the beta testers, because in the next week or so, the next couple of weeks, the beta testers will get their first ISO with Amiga OS 4.1, final edition update 1, 6, 7.2, whatever it is. And then it's up to beta testers to put it through its paces. But hardware-wise, the Tabor board's been run by about 25, 30 people with Linux, and it's been working very well. And if you've seen it at various shows around the world or people talking about it, it's, you know, a nice piece of hardware. Yes, Alan.
You mentioned MUS a certain price for the table.
Yeah,